families stuck in unsafe temporary accommodation. Meanwhile, councillors nod through unaffordable developments like Lewisham Shopping Centre, which only delivers 6% social rent. These issues are not unique to Lewisham, but they are acute. Why? Because Labour's stranglehold over our borough has led to complacency and a total lack of accountability. Last time in the local elections, every single Lewisham councillor elected was Labour, including me. But the one-party estate has failed this week. Labour has been playing politics on easy mode here, taking people's votes for granted, and is why I left and joined the Green Party. But now, their dominance is finally coming to an end. Woo! Lifelong Labour voters are telling us on the doorstep time and time again they are never going to vote for this party ever again. They are repulsed by Labour's complicity with illegal wars and genocide. They are fed up of inaction on the climate crisis and the cost of living. They want to welcome refugees and let LGBT plus people live their lives. Demonise them to score cheap political points. These local elections offer people a choice. More of the same, a managed decline, or a chance to do things differently and make real change. Just like the Lewisham residents in the 70s and 80s who fought for change, we can too. A vote for the Green Party on 7th of May sends a clear message to Keir Starmer's Labour Party. You are letting us down. And if you refuse to stand up to the billionaires, the water companies, and the private developers that are profiting off the backs of ordinary working people, get out of the way and let the Green Party take over. We don't have to accept crumbs from the table. We can fight for more genuinely affordable housing. We can protect our green spaces and assets by working in partnership with communities, not corporations. And we can work with other green councils to say no to austerity and demand proper funding for local government. Now is the Green Party's time. We are the progressive alternative in British politics. We can defeat reform, not by pandering to it, but by showing that hope can triumph over hate, that diversity is our strength, and that together we can fix what's broken and deliver the change that this country needs. Now, when I joined the Green Party last year, I said we are going to redraw the political map in Lewisham and in London. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce someone that is going to play an integral part in this realignment. An inspiration, one of the hardest working Green Party leaders in London, and the next mayor of Hackney.
Morning, everyone. That was absolutely brilliant, Liam. So Hackney used to be a place that you could afford to stay. You could raise a family. You could get a council home if you needed one. But those times are long gone. Each councillor surgery drop-in I have a family. 3 or 4 people sleeping in one room or a parent on the sofa. Disrepair, damp and mould, overcrowding. Kids have no space to do their homework. And it's me, as their local councillor, who has to tell them it will be another 10 or 15 years until they get a council home. And then I go to City Hall, where I'm an assembly member, and I see the Mayor of London and the government sticking to the same developer-led model that got us into this crisis, expecting to get us out of it. relying on scraps from developers who hide behind viability assessments, which have no interest in solving the housing crisis, but they're only protecting their profits. The homes being built across our city are not meeting need. And the people who are experiencing this housing crisis the sharpest are our disabled residents, our families, and people who truly need an affordable place to live. I've knocked on doors in Hackney for over 14 years, and I've never heard so many people feeling let down. Just feeling like they don't trust the system, they don't trust politicians, they don't trust they're really struggling to trust again and to vote in this election. They're saying they can't vote again. And I say to them, the people that the system works for, the landlords, the developers, the academy executives, they'll all be voting, and we have to vote, otherwise we'll get more of the same. I've worked in the NHS and in councils for over 10 years. I'm someone who can identify a problem and fix what's broken. And in Hackney, we're committing to doing more to deliver the council homes that we need through our pension funds, through buybacks, strengthening our planning teams, and standing up to developers. I'll use every pressure I've got to bring in rent controls in Hackney. I'm already calling on the Mayor of London to do more with his voice, and I'd do more with my voice as the Mayor of Hackney. We had rent controls until the 1980s, and it's been a failed experiment that we haven't had them since then, and we must get them back. And I will launch a Who Owns Hackney investigation, which will bring to light the reality of who owns our buildings and our spaces and in whose interests they operate, and bring as many of those into community use as possible, because I visit food banks, domestic violence services, youth services who are crying out for space to deliver for their community, because the people of Hackney own Hackney, and we're going to take it back. Now, I'm often asked if the elections are about local or national issues, and I say that they're about both. Because people tell me they want a local representative who's going to get the basics right, and that's what we're going to do, with sorting out housing repairs, improving SEND provision, and backing independent business, as well as making Hackney a place you can afford to stay, with community solutions for energy and food. But we also want people also really want a loud voice to government about the things that are failing them. The reliance on fossil fuels, ongoing austerity, ending our complicity in the genocide and war crimes, which is why this is such a powerful moment for the Green Party. We are active as a scale across this city, and I can see so many amazing London Green candidates in this room. We're at a scale that we've never delivered at before. We've got thousands and thousands of new members going out, knocking on doors across the city and campaigning in so many wards. People are seeing the hard-working Greens in their communities, but they're also seeing what we're doing on a national level too. And this is why I am so pleased to introduce to you my friend, my colleague, the Green Party leader, Zack Polanski.
Good morning, thank you very much. It is amazing to be here in Deptford, and I just found out about half an hour ago, this building used to actually be used to build kitchens, which means we've got a plumber, Hannah Spencer, at the back of the room. For jokes about changing the cistern right themselves, but I won't make them. It's been a remarkable moment for the Green Party. We have tripled our membership, we've tripled our poll ratings. And so the question I know every journalist is going to be asking me today is, what does success look like at these local elections? So I want to address it right up front. In 2023, we had record-breaking results as a Green Party. We got over 241 new councillors. Now, 2023 was an election where double the number of seats were in play than there are at this election. Nevertheless, I am confident, but not complacent. In this election, we are going to beat 241 councillors, and we are heading for a new record-breaking result for the Green Party. Now, I want to talk in a moment about why those local results and local campaigns are so important. But I want to spend a moment to zoom out, to talk about what we've all seen on our TV screens and our phone screens, both over the last few years, but in Lebanon in the last 24 hours. What is it going to take for this government to actually put robust sanctions on Israel? It is outrageous that Israel are still enjoying diplomatic and trade privileges from the international community. And as a Green Party, we are calling on this government to make much more robust sanctions, to withdraw the UK-Israel trade agreement, and to end the genocide. And we know it's not just Lebanon. We also see this going on in Iran. And the Prime Minister is not being entirely truthful with us all, with the country. He keeps saying that we are not involved with this war. But we still have UK soil and UK bases where US bombers are flying over to Iran. And what we need to do is disentangle the UK military and the US military, ban the US from using our airspaces, and do exactly what other European allies, like Pedro Sanchez in Spain, have done, and say this war is not in our name and we want nothing to do with it. Because the final thing I want to note on this war is Reform's response to it, and Nigel Farage, on day one and day two, calling for us to get even more involved with the war, which it would not just be a humanitarian disaster, but for people in this country, we know that would mean higher bills. We're already seeing sky-high bills, we're seeing rising rents, and we're going to see increasing energy shocks and prices that are already coming down the track. And so I can understand why people are looking for an alternative to the Labour government, but we know Reform are not that alternative. And why are people looking for an alternative? Well, we had 14 years of Conservative austerity, and then we elected a Labour government 2 years ago that promised change. I don't know about you, but I've not seen much change. In fact, what we have seen is a toxic combination of chaos and cowardice. A government that has no plans, no vision, and no real change. A government that has not just been complicit in genocide, a government that has watered down its promises on workers' rights, and a government that brought Peter Mandelson into the very heart of its administration. And the reason why I talk about all of this now is because it's the rot, the hypocrisy, the cynicism we see in government that has filtered down to Labour-run councils. And there is no better demonstration of that when we look at the situation around housing and Labour councils. And that's what I want to focus in on for the next few moments. Let's start with the fact that we had a government that promised to ban Section 21 evictions. This is no-fault evictions. But while they dithered and delayed for ages about doing it, Labour councils were still using loopholes to evict their own tenants around Section 21, including in Lambeth, next door, where they were still proclaiming themselves to be the party of renters. Yet they were investigated for maladministration. Essential repairs weren't being carried out. There were people living with no heating, no hot water, while they were still claiming to be the party of renters. And then we've got Hackney, very similar situation. We heard a story of an older woman living for 7 weeks. You heard me right, 7 weeks without hot water and without heating. And so for a party to hire vans when they're the party of government, what are they doing hiring vans and pointing and criticising? Actually, they should be delivering the promise and the change they were elected on. Now, we know they're not going to do that. We know they're not going to do that. But we know it's also not enough just to criticise them. People are so tired and so sick of a broken political system that far too often has sold itself out to oil and gas companies, arms trade companies, gambling companies, and property developers. We'll get onto those in a moment. And instead, what we need is an alternative. And I know there are many Green Party members in this room, in fact, candidates. You might have heard of a constituency called Gorton and Denton. And even still looking at Hannah, I still feel emotional about what Hannah pulled off, what Gorton and Denton pulled off, but frankly, what the entire country pulled off in that moment. Because we took on reform and the billionaire donors, and we now have Hannah Spencer MP. And Hannah, in just week 1 of being an MP, set up an APPG. This is an all-party parliamentary group on fuel poverty. And the reason why this matters is whether it's at the national level with our peers and our MPs, whether it's in the London Assembly, or whether it's in councils right across the country. You can see the difference when you get elected Greens. They work hard in their community, and they only have 2 vested interests: to protect people in the local community and to protect the planet. So let's look at some examples. Lewis. In Lewis, Greens have built hundreds of council homes over the last 4 years, and there are still hundreds more in the pipeline. And the key here is it's not just about quantity, the quality of the homes too. They have set up a future home standard to make sure that every home that is built is affordable, accessible. That's really key. Disabled people far too often are kept out of the conversation about housing, rather than being at it at the very beginning, that it's co-designed and co-produced with the people who need it, and also that those homes are sustainable and good for the planet. And then we've got Bristol. Bristol, a place that has built more affordable homes in the last few years, breaking records with that. This is despite the fact, by the way, Bristol has a £43 million budget shortfall. Now, this is outrageous that we have a Labour government that was voted in on a promise of change and are still forcing austerity on local councils. They say there's no money left, but we live in the 6th wealthiest economy in the world. 50 of the wealthiest families in this country own more wealth than the bottom 50% of the country. That's 50 families versus 34 million people. There is plenty of money and wealth in this country, and we need to see that wealth where it belongs, in our communities, in our council chambers, so that it can be spent on the communities who are desperate for change. And so we know this change is so desperately needed. And we are definitely not going to get it from Labour councils or a Labour government. I talked about rot in housing. Let's look at the very top. Steve Reed, the housing secretary. He just charged £2,000 a pop to property developers to have a curry with him. Now, I don't think I'm being naive. The curry better have been nice, because that money is not worth Steve Reed. But we know property developers were not spending £2,000 to have a nice chat. They were spending it to make sure that the MPs and the ministers and secretaries who make the decisions, they're in their ear. That is totally unacceptable. And it makes sense why we've seen far too often Labour councils destroy communities, destroy homes that people actually live in, and instead build unaffordable buildings that are empty, that are then sold off to foreign investors. It is outrageous, and it is time for change. And that change is coming in 28 days' time, because the battle lines are drawn. This election is between the Green Party and the Reform Party. It is a straight-up battle between hope and hate. Reform, the party of war, the party of high bills, the party of corporate backers, versus the Green Party, the party of hope with a plan, and that plan starts with the homes that people need. I want to rewind to last night. So yesterday, as you'd expect, I was getting ready for the launch today, where I'm giving this speech, and then lots of interviews. But there's a party in Kent, in Cliftonville, that have a huge council election today. It's the Green Party versus Reform. Now, the Greens came fourth in this election last time, and it's a place that, if you looked on it on paper, should be solid Nigel Farage territory. Thanet is there. It should have been a Reform heartland. But I spoke to the local party, and they've told me it is on a knife edge. Now, it would be foolish of me here to come and make any predictions, but even a second place in Cliftonville would be a pretty incredible result. But I turned up last night. I got a train. It took about 3 or 4 hours. We should do something about the state of trains in this country. Side note. Right. And when I arrived, there were 400 people on the beach. 400 people for a rally that had been organised with less than 24 hours' notice for a council election in Margate. And I think the reason why that's happening is people are rejecting the old party politics of Labour and Conservative, but they can see the divisive, the toxicity, and the awful politics that the Reform Party are trying to bring to this country in our councils. And we as a Green Party are the last stand against that. We can reject the hate of reform, and instead we can bring in a politics that actually benefits people's lives, that improves their living standards, lowers bills, and redistributes power and wealth from the super wealthy into our communities. So this is it, folks. 28 days to do everything we can. Every door we knock on, every leaflet we deliver, every social media video we push out. You'll notice that the polls say that under 65s, we are polling first place. That's a remarkable stat. Under 65s, we are polling first place across the country. The reason why I'm highlighting it, though, might sound quite odd, because every time I say this, I always get lots of messages from people who are over 65, in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, who go, please do not forget about us. Yes, the Green Party is having this amazing moment across the country, particularly, I was going to say younger people. As a 43-year-old, I don't know if I count as younger, and 50s and 60s, so it's not just young people, but also to recognise the people in this party who have stood by the Green Party for decades before it was cool. And I want to thank you for everything. It's always been cool. Thank you. I want to thank you for everything that you've done to keep the party moving, because we are in this incredible moment that I think we're really seeing this fusion between people who have been in this party a long time and the new energy, an energy that is built on environmental, social, racial, and economic justice, and an energy that is ready to have a record-breaking election. Thank you. Thank you very much. I believe we're now going to go into a press conference, so we've got not pre-organised questions, but pre-organised journalists. Thank you very much, guys.
Hello. If you, Zach's going to call out some names, and if you just want to put your hand up, I'll bring a mic over to you.
Just to set up, though, we're about to go to Lucy McDade at Sky. Do we have Lucy?
Lucy?
There we go. Thank you. Just give us a second to sit down, I suppose. Thanks. Lucy.
You ready? You spoke then about this not being our war, we shouldn't be getting involved in it. We've seen more discussions recently around the future of NATO, our place in it. You have a party policy on NATO, but do you think it should be reviewed? Do you think we should be leaving the alliance?
I think what we're seeing is Donald Trump is an increasingly unpredictable and dangerous man. Just a couple of days ago, he said he was willing to wipe out a civilization. Now, thankfully and hopefully, that has been delayed in terms of 2 weeks of a ceasefire. But the ceasefire we're seeing, we know that Israel is also taking advantage of in terms of the bombings we've seen in Lebanon. So we're seeing an increasingly unpredictable world. And what I've been arguing for a long time, and I think is coming into fruition anyway, is actually we need to be working with our European neighbours and our European allies. I think Brexit was one of the most catastrophic decisions this country has ever made, both socially, culturally, and economically. But we're also seeing that in terms of our security. We know that we've made ourselves increasingly isolated. So I think the time right now, well, the time was a couple of years ago to be having conversations with our European neighbours about what does an alliance and what does security look like without relying on Donald Trump. But actually, I think our hand is being increasingly forced on that. And the last thing I'd note is that we had a Labour government who was attacking me for these comments just a few months ago, but are now saying the exact same things. I feel incredibly vindicated in what I've been saying about Donald Trump. It didn't take a rocket scientist to look at this man and go, this is not someone we can rely on for the security of this country. And ultimately, I also think we need to be looking at a proper strategic defence review to look at other threats to this nation, both in terms of pandemic resilience, cybersecurity, and food resilience. There was a report out recently that said we're only one climate shock away from having riots in the streets over food scarcity. So I think we generally need to have a huge holistic view at looking at what does our national security look like, because the first principle rule of any government, and indeed any political leader, should be protecting people in this country. And we know we are not safe when our security relies on Donald Trump. Krishnan Gurram-Murphy at Channel 4.
I'm doing an interview later, so
Krishnan doesn't want to talk to me, noted. We're going to move to press now, so we're going to go in groups of 3. So first of all, we've got Abby Llewellyn at PA. Abby's at the front here, Georgia. Sorry, we're just keeping you working.
Hi. So Labour have accused the Greens of trying to block at least 42,000 homes being built, including 13,000 affordable homes since 2018. Given the housing crisis that you have spoken about today, how can you justify Greens opposing developments?
Thank you. And Daisy Eastlake at the Times.
Thank you. You said in your speech today that you would withdraw from the UK-Israel trade agreement. Trade between the UK and Israel was worth $6.2 billion in the year end of the second quarter of 2025. Do you accept that policies like this would come with an economic cost for people across Britain? And what would you do to plug gaps like that under a Green government? Thanks.
Thanks, Daisy. And finally, Rivka Brown at Novara Media.
So local authorities, as you know, don't actually have the power to introduce rent controls, and that's obviously a big plank of what Zoe spoke about and, you know, what was briefed yesterday to the Times. I'm interested in, given the fact that, you know, there isn't going to be a Green government, at least for some years, a Green central government that is, how you plan on pushing for rent controls, given that's not a power local governments actually have.
Thank you very much. So I'll answer the 3 and then I'll hand over to Zoe and Liam as well. So to begin with, we know that the Labour Party have hired a van today with a big number on it. I don't know where they've got that number from, and it seems like an absolute nonsense number. I'd make the wider point that I think people in this country want to see a Labour government actually delivering the homes that they promised, rather than hiring vans to be outside Green Party conferences. It's pretty odd. And second, there was a report yesterday that even the targets Labour have set themselves, they are massively missing. And so I think it's about making sure that if you set a target, you actually hit it. In terms of making sure that homes are built, we do have a housing crisis. But what we also have is an affordability crisis. And actually, it's about making sure we build the right homes at the right price, at the right place. And what we see far too often with Labour councils is that building luxury, unaffordable buildings that no one's ever going to live in. They often knock down communities or destroy communities that are already there in the name of regeneration, but don't actually replace the homes with affordable homes or council homes. And so I would reject the premise, first of all, that there's any sense that Greens are blocking any more developments than anyone else's. But second, I would say if a development is being blocked because it's an unaffordable luxury development, then I'm proud of any Green Party council that does that. We need to make sure that we are building the homes that people actually need, that are fit to live in, that are affordable and accessible. And again, I think you only need to look at the evidence of a Labour government where the Housing Secretary is going for curries for £2,000 a curry with property developers to see that they are building homes that are based on vested interests, that are based on profit, as opposed to the actual housing need that people need. On Israel, Daisy, the first thing I would say is that I don't think we should be putting a cost on people's lives. And actually, ultimately, the humanitarian aspect, the fact that we've seen an ongoing genocide, we've seen hundreds of people die in the last 24 hours in Lebanon, as well as school children who have died in Iran, all by the US-Israeli military strikes jointly, is totally unacceptable. And so the first place to go, I think, is to make sure that there is no price on this, and we need to make sure that we're protecting human life. Second, I think we need to look at what does economic sovereignty look like, and where we're relying on countries that have bad human rights records, or countries that are committing human rights abuses or terror acts, as we're seeing this rogue state Israel are doing at the moment, then it's clearly important that we disentangle from that. And I think there's two ways of doing that. One is more robust sanctions, as I've spoken about today. But two is also making sure we're having an industrial revolution in this country, whether that's to tackle the climate crisis and investing in wind turbines, investing in solar panels, whether it's investing in the productivity of the future. That's something this country needs to do anyway. But second, that means we wouldn't be relying on countries that are committing human rights abuses because we need to keep our economic sovereignty going. I think ultimately we should be looking at how do we protect this country both economically and make sure we're protecting the ethics and morality of international law. And finally to Rivka. Zoe loves talking about rent control, so I don't want to steal her thunder entirely. But I think, first of all, I'd echo what Zoe said, that the experiment in this country has actually been not to have rent controls. So I think often this gets presented as some radical, wild policy. Actually, I think what's wild is that we've spent over £70 billion in the last 5 years on welfare, which has been money going straight from the government into the pockets of private landlords, as opposed to building social homes or council homes that could be rent capped or rent controlled straight away, where they're controlled under local authorities. Local authorities can be really, really good landlords and have really good conditions for their tenants and make sure that they're bringing in essential repairs and caring for them, and make sure that they're capping the rent as well. So I'd say that's one obvious place to go. But Zoe's been doing lots of work with this, with Sadiq Khan, so I will pass the mic to Zoe.
Waiting to speak. Yeah, so just on rent controls, I think it picks up on a theme from Zack's speech about how residents really want their representatives to be a loud voice to government about what is failing. It's what I've been pushing the Mayor of London to do. He claims he's on the side of renters. He writes it in his manifesto. He says he supports rent controls at Mayor's Questions, where we're sat there. But he doesn't really do anything else beyond that, and that's not going to get you change. Like anyone who's an activist or ever achieved change, you know you need to push for it, and you need to show that these things are going to work. So when I was first elected as an assembly member, I brought academics, renters groups into the chamber at City Hall, and we talked about what a rent control could look like, how it needs to be in line with wages, how it needs to be between tenancies, so people can't put the rent up between people moving in and out. So we're ready with that rent control. So when we do get the power, which we're going to push for, we're ready to go. So we're not waiting another 2 years designing it. So I just think it's about using the power, that convening power. And, and I know a lot of people in this room are backing the calls from the Housing Coalition March, which is taking place on the 18th of April. And it's really showing up and supporting that community demand, but using our powers as well. And then on developers and backing housing developments, I proudly support community groups who are calling out failing planning applications in our communities, from our councils or from private developers. We've got a site in Hackney that the council bought for 60 million, and the first proposal that was put forward had no affordable homes in it, and that's just not good enough. It's in an area with high demand, and I do think, like I was saying in my speech, we need to challenge the viability model that was put in place so that we got more council homes, but now developers are hiding behind because they want to protect their profits. Berkeley Homes made £500 million in 1 year. They're a predominantly London-based developer, yet they're claiming they can't deliver affordable homes and accessible homes, and I think we need to stand up to them.
And yes, just to add to what Zoe was saying about homes, I mean, this is something that Labour always wants to do. It wants to attack us, say that we're anti-homes. It's hired a van. It really just demonstrates that they have massively failed when it comes to house building. I mean, in Lewisham, they're well behind on their housing delivery targets. They are wanting to push through this Lewisham shopping centre development, which is only going to deliver 6% social rent. We also have to think about what we mean when we talk about affordable housing, because quite often, affordable housing isn't actually affordable. A lot of the time, we've got things like shared ownership that gets rolled into that. So we also really need to interrogate that as well. The other thing is that, you know, we want good quality, affordable family homes. We have thousands of families languishing in temporary accommodation in terrible conditions. Developments like Lewisham Shopping Centre, it's delivering a paucity of family homes, a paucity of 3 beds, right? And those are the types of homes that we need. So we really need to increase that. And also, even when, you know, Labour is allowing affordable developments to go through, so look at the affordable development of the Filigree in Lewisham Gateway. It's empty. It's currently sitting empty. And families have been scattered outside of the borough to Leatherhead and Maidenhead because they allowed a shoddy development to go through. And you've got Lewisham's mayoral candidate taking money from that developer. She was recently, she was a consultant for them, and she's written blogs about how, you know, Lewisham Gateway is a great example of public-private partnership. But those public-private partnerships is exactly the reason that we're in this mess. And Labour are showing that they cannot fix the housing crisis. And that's why we need the Green Party to step in and take over.
We're going to go for another trio now. So we've got Christian Calgi at the Daily Mail.
Thank you. So a new poll today finds that over 60% of your own party's voters oppose plans to reduce the speed limit on Britain's motorways to 55 miles an hour. Will you now U-turn on this policy?
Thank you, Christian. David Williamson at The Express.
Thanks so very much. One of the great challenges in the country remains pensioner poverty. Will you commit to keeping the triple lock?
Thank you. And Holly Allen at The Telegraph. Sorry, Genevieve.
Could you provide a few more details about what further sanctions you believe need to be imposed on Israel? Do you believe, for example, that there needs to be a further or stricter arms embargo on Israel than we have at the moment?
Thank you very much. So, Christian, if I start with motorways, I'm glad to have the Daily Mail here in person because you have this curious habit of you and the Telegraph, to be fair, going through kind of old Green Party policies that aren't in our manifesto, where it literally says on that motorway policy at the very end of it, this policy is under review. So I think the first thing to say is that wasn't in our manifesto. More widely, though, I think if it does provoke a conversation about the fact that we know in a fuel crisis that reducing people's speeds, as well as the importance of doing that to reduce danger on the roads and deaths on the roads, is really important to have that conversation. So as we reach the kind of next election, we'll be setting out exactly what our plans are. What I know for certain, though, is the biggest part of our plans will be about investing in public transport, particularly in trains, so people are able to get around from city to city and make sure that they're affordable, accessible trains. We also have a conversation about nationalising the trains and the rolling stock, because actually I think people being able to use trains and not be on motorways in the first place is actually the first place to have this conversation. David, at The Express, you asked me about, sorry, this is the problem with threes, isn't it? Triple lock. Yeah, so, I mean, we'll be setting that out at the next manifesto because that's going to be about the holistic kind of view of what our spending plans look like. What I want to say on principle, though, is this. This question often gets phrased as younger people have been screwed over, and that is absolutely true. whether we're looking at renting that we've talked about a lot today, whether we're talking about an increasingly precarious job market, whether we're talking about the rise of artificial intelligence, and of course of student debt and the burden that's been placed on students that seems to be getting more and more, particularly with the Plan 2 loans. But I reject any idea that we need to pit the younger generation against the older generation, particularly people who have worked hard all of their lives and have expected something on pensions. I think that's a classic divide and rule tactic. And actually, I think the real divide here is between the 99%, which includes younger people, older people, and everyone in between, and the 1%. And it's not that the 1% are necessarily bad. In fact, we've got a group called the Patriotic Millionaires who are saying tax us more, redistribute our wealth and power around society. That would be better for everyone. So I reject the kind of binary framing, not that you did this, between younger people and older people. I think we can look after both demographics and indeed must look after both demographics and recognise the real problem here is with the hoarding of wealth. And actually we need to be redistributing that money around the economy. And then... Finally, Genevieve, I think all options are on the table. I think what's most obvious is that Israel are behaving in a completely uncontrolled way, in a way that they seem to believe they have completely immunity to any kind of sanction or any kind of criticism. And what I'm so frustrated with the government is that we just get words. The words aren't even strong enough, but even if they were, they would just be words. And actually they have levers, they have mechanisms that they could be putting into play that could prevent or at least reduce some of the destruction, the humanitarian crisis and the death we are seeing every single day. And the right time to do these sanctions would have been years ago. It's not that this just happened in Lebanon and now we need sanctions. We have been calling for this for literal years. My point I'm making today, though, is it's becoming even more egregious, even more blatant, even more inhumane. And the idea that this could keep going on and our government could still have sanctions, could still withdraw from a UK-Israel deal and aren't prepared to do that. My question is, what would it take? What would Israel actually have to do for us to go, this is not a country that is behaving like an ally. In fact, this is a country that is behaving like a rogue state, a country that the world, any community that cares about international law, need to come together and say this is not acceptable. We need to do everything we can to stop it. And of course, that relies on pulling every sanction, every arms embargo that we could make to make sure that Israel can't continue to murder innocent people. We've just got one final question then, which is from Tom Scottson at Politics Home. And Tom, the numbers didn't work in groups of 3. I'm not just singling you out.
Thank you. New parties on the right have found it very difficult to vet candidates at quite a quick pace. What are the Green Party doing to screen as many people in such a short space of time?
Yeah, I think it is a real challenge, and I think it's important to be honest about that. The Green Party is growing at such an immense pace, and whether it's our systems around our conference, whether it's about membership packs, and indeed whether it's about finding candidates and making sure they're appropriate for their local communities, we are having to upscale everything that we do. I'm really proud of all the staff members who work for the Green Party and indeed all the volunteers. In fact, yes, let's give them a round of applause. We're having active conversations at the moment about both, first of all, encouraging candidates themselves to make sure that they're doing the appropriate checks around declaring anything that we might need to know so that accountable and transparent decisions can be made at the point of putting someone's name on a ballot paper. Second, we're making sure that we are having even more robust systems internally to make sure that both our disciplinary process is working in the right way, but more important than the disciplinary process is a prevention process to make sure that we're really clear in being open and transparent about the values of a party that rejects homophobia, misogyny, transphobia, any form of ableism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, any form of hate crime, to be really clear both as leader, both as mayoral candidates and assembly member and councillor, and also all people who represent the party to make sure that in every communication we do, we're modelling best practice. So people know, not just when they stand for the Green Party, but even when they join the Green Party, it's really clear the values of the party, that they're congruent with everything that we do. So any people who align with those values would want to join the party, never mind standing for the Green Party. And I also recognise that we're dealing with an immense amount of people very quickly, and so I won't be surprised if we have the odd candidate where we have to distance themselves from them. I'm not planning to do that, but also I'm recognising up front that it is a challenge that you suddenly accept thousands of people and you say, okay, we're putting your name on a ballot paper. So we're doing everything we can to make sure we're doing due diligence. We'll continue to do that. We're not being complacent about it for a second, and recognise the immense scale of the task that's in front of us. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here.
Yeah, I just on that as well. I'm looking around the room and I can see so many incredible candidates. A lot of Lewisham candidates here. I can see Hackney candidates, Greenwich candidates, Newham candidates, our brilliant Mayoral candidates. And because the party has grown so much, yes, of course, there are going to be challenges, as Zack says, but also we are getting some incredible people step forward to represent their communities. We are going to have a completely different makeup in our local councils, right? It's not just going to be people that do as they're told, toe the party line, and just want to use councils as a stepping stone, a rung on the ladder. No, it's actually people that want to represent the communities that they're from. So I think we really need to big those people up, and, you know, I think it's going to be very, very exciting. So, yeah, thanks so much.
Liam's given me a very lovely segue there as well to recognising two other mayoral candidates in the room. So we've got Hira, if you can give us a wave. In fact, stand up, Hira. Running in Tower Hamlets. And next to Hira, we have Arik, who's running in Newham. So I think two things are about to happen, both which require mass coordination. We're going to be fine. One is we're all in a moment going to step outside for a huge group photo. And second, I believe if there's international journalists in the room, I'm going to do a press huddle with the international journalists only straight after the photo, so please don't disappear. And then I believe the three of us, alongside our MP and peers and deputy leader, are going to be doing interviews with other media journalists who are here. Thank you very much for being here, and we're going to step outside.